what people think disturbs me not in the slightest. You probably find all kinds of people that think I'm an absolutely worthless human being. I don't care. Having said that, do I want bad things to happen? No. No, I don't want bad things to happen to anybody.
323 to 584.
Hope everyone gets what they want and it leads to a nice life for them. Unfortunately, this is not the truth. Beautiful white crystals. I said, fuck yeah. I've got fentanyl.
I'm John Roberts, and this is the Godfather of Fentanyl. In early 1981, Oklahoma's most notorious clandestine chemist, George Eric Marquardt, also known as Squeak, is serving a 10-year sentence for drug manufacturing at the federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. A self-described sociopath and full-time outlaw, Marquardt has just learned about a new drug, fentanyl, from fellow inmate and heroin kingpin Louis Cirillo.
Louis Cirillo said, look at this drug. Instant funny. And it was the first time I've ever heard the name fentanyl.
Fentanyl was first created by Janssen Pharmaceuticals as a painkiller that was rapid onset with a very fast recovery time. So when people were undergoing operations, they could be administered fentanyl, and then they would be able to come out of it very fast. What makes fentanyl a different drug is that fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, and so that differs from the natural products in that it is not isolated from a plant.
In other words, fentanyl is made from chemicals, not the opium poppy. By the early 1980s, fentanyl was commonly used in hospitals during surgery, and it had caught the attention of those involved in the dark underworld of drug trafficking. Heroin kingpins like Louis Cirillo realize that if they can find a chemist who can make fentanyl as a street drug, they can sell it as a heroin substitute and make millions of dollars.
Louis Cirillo and I had some conversation about whether I thought I could make fentanyl or not. I thought I could. But Cirillo had a reputation of being exceptionally dangerous to deal with. So I said, I'm not interested. And Cirillo thought I probably couldn't do it. I find that amusing because I was headed down a long, dark tunnel. I mean, I was going to do this thing at some point. I just needed the right partner.
In the crime business, the network is out there. It's just, who do you trust? In the end, it's kind of a gut feeling.
Less than a year later, in the spring of 1982, Marquardt will get this gut feeling when he meets a newly transferred inmate, Joseph Martyr.
Joseph Martir was the central figure in what at the time was the largest PCP factory ever found in the United States. My name is Bruce Antkowiak. From 1977 until 1983, I was a federal prosecutor in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Joseph Martir was a graduate of Penn. Martir studied political science there. However, he decided to go into the business of manufacturing and distributing a very, very large quantity of PCP. Angel dust, as it was referred to as a street name, was a very, very powerful hallucinogen. This case was extremely unusual. You simply did not see an Ivy League graduate gravitate towards illicit drug markets.
Martir seemed to be an intelligent guy, and he was friendly with me, so I was friendly with him. So discussion started up. Martir and I started talking about manufacturing street fentanyl. He agreed that was the next big thing in clandestine drug manufacturing, and there were huge profits to be made. Next thing you know, you're plotting on future crimes.
In the mid-1980s, setting up an illicit street fentanyl lab required a pretty hefty investment to purchase laboratory-grade glassware and equipment. But after that initial cost, a skilled chemist can take just $2,000 worth of chemicals and turn them into $100,000 worth of drugs. And then do it over and over and over again.
I told Martir I thought I could make street fentanyl. But I said, I think we've got something here that's going to make PCP look like nice stuff. And I think if we make a bunch of this stuff, we're going to kill a bunch of people. That didn't bother him any. He said when we got out, he was going to raise some money to do it.
In 1984, Marquardt is released from prison and returns to Oklahoma. Meanwhile, Martir is transferred to the federal facility in Danbury, Connecticut to finish out his sentence. Here, Martir will connect with the final co-conspirator in the fentanyl project, the Money Man.
My name is Mark Rush. I'm a former federal prosecutor. What happens is while Martir is in Danbury, he meets a disgraced lawyer who said that if Martir would ever need anyone to be a money man, he should give a gentleman by the name of Muscatello a call, that he has funding, that he's willing to invest, and he can make things happen for you.
In 1989, after Martir got out, we had verbal communication. He indicated to me the green status of the fentanyl project. He said he had it funded by this Muscatello person. Well, I thought that was great news, even though I didn't really know much about Muscatello.
My name is Cynthia Payne, and I am the sister of Christopher Muscatello. Chris was never completely open or forthcoming to me, but I was aware that he was in the marijuana business. To my knowledge, he was not involved in any other drugs. I didn't find out about the connections that he had in Boston until much later.
This is the image Boston likes to project. A city thriving, rich in history, attracting millions of tourists. But this is also Boston. Crime, drugs, violence, and gangs.
At the time, organized crime in Boston was controlled by the Irish mob, led by the ruthless gangster Whitey Bulger.
James Whitey Bulger is an alleged kingpin of organized crime.
It turns out Moscatello was involved in drug distribution with connections to the Boston mob.
I found out Muscatello, he'd been hauling marijuana and cocaine and other things like this. Lots of money was made off of Muscatello, and he had a fair supply of it. But in terms of the sources of Muscatello's funding, that's not the point. I don't care if you got it from the devil. He came up with enough to get started. So I went out to Boston, just set up in the street fentanyl lab. Marty put together the TX Green front so we could purchase the glassware and chemicals from the local chemical supply houses.
A front is a fake company that criminals use to hide illegal activities from law enforcement.
I told him, you know, I've been in this business for a long time. Do not attract a great deal of attention.
But in the shadowy world of illicit drug manufacturing, that's much easier said than done. Especially when you're trying to buy the kinds of chemicals and sophisticated lab equipment that the feds keep a very close eye on.
I'm Gerald Graves. I was a special agent close to 23 years with DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. In the case of drugs, chemicals, etc., companies that are licensed by DEA to sell these items, and it's certainly in their interest to keep these items under control. And one way they do it is they notify DEA in cases of suspicious transactions. Because TX Green had a postal box as an address and no actual business address per se, and was a newly formed company with no history, that was enough red flags for that chemical company to contact the Drug Enforcement Administration. I learned that TX Green has been ordering chemicals from various other chemical companies in the area. So we consult with the chemical specialist in the Drug Enforcement Administration out of New York. That would be chemist Jack Fasinello.
I was fishing on a boat in Cape Cod, and my pager went off. They asked me to call the Boston office, and they said they have a list of chemicals. They were going to fax it to me to look at. So we went to shore, and I looked at the list, and I immediately called them and said, oh, shit.
He advises us that it looks as though these guys are doing a laboratory somewhere.
And it seemed to me it was going to be a big lab because of the amount of chemicals that they were purchasing.
And at that point, an investigation is started. And the quest now is to find out what is it that they are doing. So we go out to the postal box that TX Green used as an address.
Investigators seize the mail and begin contacting the companies listed on the return addresses.
Basically, you see the return address, and then you contact that person and say, what are you doing with TX Green? One of the leads we found out is that a guy named Joseph Martier contacted a custom glass blower to make him beakers and a rotary evaporator of a very, very large size, which was quite unusual. So who was Joseph Martier? It turns out Martier was out on parole from federal prison for clandestine manufacturing in Pennsylvania, which led us to ask, why was he up in the Boston area?
Martier once had an IQ score of 140 or something like that. And he thought, I'm quite a bright person, I can do anything. That was his perception. And this perception collided with reality.
The DEA agents learn when Martier is scheduled to pick up the glassware, and they are waiting with surveillance.
We watch Martier, accompanied by his wife, with a baby carriage, picking up their glassware and wheeling it through Cambridge, Massachusetts. We said, what are these guys doing? I mean, this is amateur hour. It was just like surreal.
Damn fool.
A month later, we find out another TX Green representative was going to pick up a 50-gallon drum of benzene from a local Boston chemical manufacturer. So I basically joined the chemical company to pretend to be an employee and was working undercover. We knew that this individual was going to pick up this barrel of benzene at a particular time. But we did not know who would be coming in.
Unknown to the agents, the unidentified suspect they are about to meet is the financier of the street fentanyl operation. Boston mob-connected drug trafficker Christopher Moscatello.
It was an unusual pickup because, number one, he arrived in a privately owned car, a green Range Rover. It was the first time I'd met this gentleman. He was certainly very clean dressed, and at that time we used the term yuppies, and he seemed to be a yuppie. Classic polo shirt, top-sided shoes, and blue jeans.
Apparently, when Moscatello went to pick up the benzene barrel, he had to look hip. Of course, the chemical industry is not filled with a lot of hip people.
I basically engaged him in a conversation to see how knowledgeable he was. He was unable to really answer basic questions. He didn't even know what benzene was used for. So I determined that this guy, I don't know what role he plays in it, but he was certainly not a person that was involved in legitimate chemical manufacturing. Once the barrel was loaded and secured inside his Range Rover, he took off. And we had a surveillance operation follow him. The surveillance team followed him all the way to Pembroke, Massachusetts. That southern point of eastern Massachusetts, just above Cape Cod, is the cranberry center of America. So it's a flat area, and the roadways only go between these cranberry bogs. So you can see that there are other cars following you, and he determined that he was indeed being followed. And basically, he was able to elude them. How he did that, I don't know. All I learned later on, to my disappointment, was that he indeed was lost. We did not see him or know where he went at that point.
A couple of weeks later, I called for a status, and I was told that the case was closed.
I never made the assumption that the people on the opposite side of the fence were stupid. But why law enforcement didn't pursue that is one of the big mysteries of the case. And I considered myself lucky.
Marquardt is indeed lucky. Law enforcement doesn't know it, but the criminals who just eluded them will soon go on to release the deadliest street drug in history. Marquardt will continue down the road to fentanyl, even while the nation ramps up its war on drugs.
President Bush says the war against drugs is just beginning. He is proposing a $1.1 billion hike in his anti-drug program.
A truly national drug control strategy demands that we tap resources of every description.
By 1990, America's war on drugs is going full force.
This is going to be a long effort, and we've stressed that this is no weekend war.
Penalties for drug-related offenses are significantly stiffer.
We're going to have to get rougher and tougher with some Americans.
While law enforcement on every level is tackling a record number of cases.
Enforcement has to be kept up until educational programs can work.
I'm Julius Erving of the Philadelphia 76ers.
I'm Greg Buttle of the National Football League.
Win the race against drugs. Team up against drugs.
Knock drugs out of your life by just saying no.
But none of this deters Marquardt.
Anyway, towards the beginning of October, after that benzene incident, I had to go hunt Los Capello down. See, Wistful Dempsey was being followed by 2,000 DEA agents. Los Capello was scared to death that he was going to be busted right now. And Los Capello said that the boss of bosses, or some big-time gangster, said we were hot, and now we had to close down the whole fentanyl project without having manufactured any fentanyl at all. I saw my opportunity. I convinced him to give me the pots and pans. So I loaded up all the glassware. And I set off across the country in my pickup. I figured either it was bullshit, and I was quite safe, or so far gone that it didn't matter, but I might as well keep going with Los Capello.
What you gonna say on Judgment Day? You better get on your knees and pray. For every sin there's a price to pay. What's it gonna cost on Judgment Day?
I drove back west with a large collection of glassware. Quite pleased about it. We drove through a police roadblock. He says, "What's in the back of the truck?" And I explained to the guy. It was laboratory junk. They just took a look at me, sitting there in my bib overalls and my flannel shirt, and waved me through.
As you go on in the crime business, you take your little victories and your little successes and encourages you to maybe try another one. That is an addiction in itself, but at the same time, you know it only ends one of two ways. You're either dead or you're in jail.
I didn't want to go back to Oklahoma because I figured it was too hot down there. So I ended up renting a place to live in a slightly different part of the country. It was a rather nice place. I had rather pleasant neighbors. You know, most people are interested in their own concerns, and they're not terribly interested in yours or mine. So I figured I could get away with things here. I set up the equipment in the house and started experimentation with production of street fentanyl.
People who manufacture illicit drugs do it for the money, like anything else. And of course, they're probably addicted too. I was also an addict, so I wanted to have my own supply. But Squeak was never an addict. He was all about the science. Could he find a new way to synthesize a drug? Could he make things that had never been made before? Manufacturing street fentanyl was a challenge. It's the kind of thing he lived for. As a chemist myself, you want to make a particular compound. You take a look at it, you think of ways that it could be made, and then you search the chemical literature. Your genius will be to make changes in those compounds. The greater your ability is to accomplish that sort of thing, the finer chemist that you will be known as. Certainly for Squeak, it's a special gift, one which I never had.
I had a fair idea of how to go about making fentanyl, as described in the Janssen patent. But they leave it to you to work out the details yourself. They might outline a reaction sequence that such a compound could be produced by, but that wouldn't tell you a great deal about the details of actually doing it. My approach was to take what's in the literature and mess with it and hope for serendipity to strike. And every now and then it does.
In November 1990, after weeks of work in his home lab in Wichita, George Eric Marquardt makes a discovery that will change the course of history.
One day, in just a heap of dirty glassware, I had been trying this, trying that, doing this, doing that. I accidentally stumbled over a small variant, which got me tremendously excited. And then suddenly, there was a heavy smoke that poured from the neck of the flask, and I held it up to the light, and I could just get a glint of crystals. Beautiful white crystals. I was extremely excited. Oh my goodness.
The self-taught chemical genius, who never even graduated high school, has found a shortcut that will make the mass production of street fentanyl possible for the first time ever.
Then the most astonishing thing happened. This white powder fell down into the flask. It was immensely satisfying. And I said, fuck yeah, I want that fentanyl.
Two months later, at the end of January 1991, Marquardt's partner, Joseph Martier, takes the fentanyl to New York City. He finds a dealer who agrees to dilute it and sell it on the street as heroin.
Compared to heroin, a very tiny amount of fentanyl is needed to produce the same high because it is so extremely potent.
What Martier and the dealer fail to realize is that fentanyl is about 50 times more powerful than heroin.
So if it does not get adequately diluted, then the person doesn't just get a bad high, they get a deadly dose.
I can make you any organic compound in the world, but how much of it is going to get somebody high? I didn't know, and I told them that. Martier was, we can cut it, no problem, blah, blah, blah. Then I hear about Stiff City.
Officials are blaming a potent form of heroin tonight for the death of 6 people.
Emergency rooms are seeing more heroin overdoses than ever before.
I watched on TV. I mean, it was on the national news.
So far, 12 people have been killed.
At least 100 others have been injured.
There were a lot of people dropping over.
Police say they found the bodies of 3 more people suspected of overdosing.
Police believe all the deaths are linked to heroin purchased in Bronx, New York.
I assumed Martier had messed up the dilution. I was pissed off. I drove up the street and called him from the telephone. I just lost it. You stupid son of a bitch. You can't be in this business and make mistakes like that. If you make mistakes, they will be noticed. And of course, you hit DEA intelligence.
I have never seen, up to that point in my career, this type of crisis.
Over the period of 1 weekend, there was something like 27 overdoses from what was at the time believed to be Colombian heroin. It was causing the most deaths that I'd ever seen.
This is a truly monumental moment. It instantly becomes a public health crisis in New York City. Law enforcement immediately begins taking unprecedented measures to try to warn people. Do not take this drug. It can kill you.
Toxic heroin was sold Friday in New York City. Use of this toxic heroin has resulted in overdoses and death. If you use this toxic heroin, it may cause death.
They actually had to go out publicly and announce this is a bad batch of heroin, all in the effort to save lives.
Attention, toxic heroin was sold Friday in New York City. Use of this toxic heroin has resulted in overdoses and deaths.
They're searching rooftops with helicopters and abandoned buildings on foot for people who may have taken the drug. Police are concentrating their efforts in the South Bronx because this is where they believe the drug was sold.
Similar reports came in from cities within 120 miles of New York.
We began receiving notifications from other police departments in the metropolitan area, such as Newark, Paterson, Irvington, New Jersey, and Hartford, Connecticut, that they were having similar problems.
It made absolutely no sense. I mean, traditional heroin dealers want repeat customers. Established drug dealers, they actually have branded street heroin packages are stamped with particular names. They were names of popular movies at that time.
Police tell me they know of 3 brands of heroin being sold on the streets here in South Bronx. The one suspected of being responsible for deaths and illnesses is called Tango and Cash.
What we couldn't understand in terms of knowing that drug business is a business, why would they go and kill out their client base? So we were perplexed.
Soon after the overdoses in New York, I was sent a package consisting of 2 glassine envelopes that were stamped Tango and Cash. I was able to do the analysis of the material, and my analysis concluded that they in fact contain fentanyl and no heroin.
I was working on a drug task force at the time, DEA task force in Honolulu, and we got intelligence bulletins that there was a drug called fentanyl out on the street in New York. It was not something that I was familiar with.
When it's revealed that Tango and Cash is fentanyl and not traditional heroin, it's shocking news. Remember that this is 1991. Most people have never heard of fentanyl before. Those who have only know it as a medicinal drug that, like other pharmaceuticals, has a closely guarded manufacturing process. They are not expecting it to show up on the streets, and especially not in such devastating quantities.
We were very concerned because people were dying. Who speaks for the dead? Somebody has to investigate.
As the war on drugs continues, police hope that by putting out the words of warning on the streets, they can win this battle against Tango and Cash before the deadly drug takes any more lives.
After the spectacular stiffs out in New York City, I called Martier. I said, we can't do this. It's not going to work. It was my belief that the Drug Enforcement Administration were going to keep pursuing this, that they were not going to stop until they found out who had done this, and that we were now in some very deep trouble.
Once the police started going around with loudspeakers saying, don't use Tango and Cash, it's going to overdose you, it's going to kill you, everybody thinks that's not going to happen to me, and I want the strongest stuff I can get.
People be using it left and right. Yeah. They buying it left and right.
It's like everybody that's doing it is playing Russian roulette.
Heroin users develop a tolerance of opioids, which they must ingest more and more of the drug or get a more potent form of the drug in order to achieve the same feelings of euphoria. Unfortunately, they can have the adverse effect of people actually seeking out this particular drug and creating, in terms, more demand.
Apparently, when the news came out that it killed all those people, it drove the price sky high.
So Muscatello and the organized crime types up in Boston saw an opportunity to make a nice big pile of money. That's when Muscatello reestablished communications. He claimed we owed him $1 million worth of product because of all the trouble he went through and the money he had spent to set everything up. When they lost opportunity, you know, because he could have been making this much money with cocaine, he wanted me to make more fentanyl. He said he'd give us pocket money to survive on, and then when we had made him $1 million, he would then start paying the regular price for the stuff. I knew this was pure horseshit. Opportunity costs in the drug business. What a lot of hokum that is, you know. They call it murder opportunity cost. Who the hell do you think you are? You're nothing but a goddamn criminal and a fucking bum. This isn't opportunity. This is a criminal operation, moron. I told Marty Error to tell Muscatello. I said, you tell him it's over. Then Muscatello starts ratcheting up the pressure. Nasty business. Nasty fucking business.
It's a dangerous business. There's no two ways about it. And there's a lot of money involved, and money makes people do desperate things.
I mean, what am I going to do? Go out there and tell the Irish mob I thought $1 million it was bullshit? Well, if I had a small army, perhaps I would do that. But I did not. So the agreement is to start up again and pay this off. Make all we can get.
Having agreed to work off the alleged debt to Muscatello, Marquardt begins producing larger batches of street fentanyl that will soon be taken out to cities all over the northeastern United States. The largest and most devastating overdose outbreak to date is about to unfold, and law enforcement is about to find themselves in a race against the clock to stop it.
We're gonna start fucking blanketing the East Coast with fentanyl. Here we go.
Coming up on The Godfather of Fentanyl. The Boston mob-connected drug trafficker Christopher Muscatello takes the fentanyl out to cities all over the Northeast.
Where's it coming from?
While Marquardt begins to question Muscatello's true intentions.
After the Walhalla incident, I thought maybe the organized crime types up in Boston wanted to weaponize this stuff and destroy the civilized world.